Story number 1. The Uber driver. Growing up, I always wanted to be a police officer. My dad and my grandfather was a police officer. My dad was killed in the line of duty 8 years ago today. I'm 25 years old now, and I'm going to school to be a police officer in San Francisco. I never really believed in anything paranormal up until last Wednesday. I go to school full time, and I drive for Uber a few times throughout the week. We usually get out of class at 7:15 p.m., but on this day, class let out at 8:30. As former Detective Harris was teaching the class, he excused himself several times to take a personal phone call. He was actually my dad's partner for 22 years, and him taking his phone call privately was no big deal. I really didn't think much of it. It was just a little bit odd because normally he just ignores the calls. As soon as the class was over, Detective Harris informed me that he just received a phone call that was very important. The phone call was to inform Detective Harris that the man that killed my father had escaped from the San Francisco penitentiary and was on the loose. The man that killed my dad name was Carl Stevens. So many thoughts were rushing through my head at the time, but this man was to receive 2 life sentences for what he had done. He had executed my dad. Body cam footage showed that my dad pulled over Carl Stevens for running a red light. In fact, at the time, Carl Stevens even had a valid driver's license, and my dad was not one of the sticklers. He was just going to give him a warning. But as my dad took Carl's driver's license, he turned and shot him point blank in the face. There was a high-speed crash after he did that, and 2 innocent pedestrians unfortunately lost their lives after he crashed into them. After getting the information from Detective Harris, I immediately called my mom and 2 sisters to let them know. They were all pretty upset after hearing the news, and they decided to go on vacation to our vacation house in Arizona for a few weeks until things calmed down. A couple days later, I was Ubering, and that's when the craziest stuff happened. I got an alert on my phone that I have a person that needed to be picked up at 1606 Wells Street, which was a hotel. But what caught my attention was the name. The name was Jane Doe, and it just seemed a little bit weird. It's not surprising that people use fake names when Ubering. It's 2020 and things are a bit crazy right now. Anyhow, I accepted the ride, and as I pulled up, I seen a woman standing outside. The woman was a bit tall compared to the average woman. She had brown hair and sunglasses with a long black trench coat dress looking thing. As she got into the back seat, she seemed a bit suspicious, biting her fingernails and looking around in a suspicious way. I asked her, "Was everything okay?" And she just nodded. Instead of speaking to me, she just texted me and asked me to turn down the heat in the car. And then again, I asked her, "Is everything okay, ma'am?" And that's when she took off her wig and pointed the gun at the back of my head. After taking off her wig, it was clear she was a man. I calmly asked, "Mrs. Doe, what do you want from me?" She said, "Mrs. Doe? No. My name is Carl Stevens, and I'm going to kill you." As this was happening, I looked over in my passenger seat and I saw my dad. I was freaked out, but at the same time I was at peace. You know, they say that your life flashes before you die. So that's what I was thinking. He looked over at me and told me to count to 3. "Son, I want you to duck your head to the right on the count of 3. Now, either I was hallucinating or this was obviously the spirit of my dad, because he passed away 8 years ago at the hands of this lunatic behind me. He counted. 1, 2, 3. I ducked my head to the right, and there were 2 shots fired. One of the shots barely missed me, and it went out the front windshield. As I regained control of the car, I noticed that my dad was no longer in the passenger seat, but he was in the back seat with Carl. Carl screamed, literally crying tears, as he fired shots out the passenger window next to him until the gun was empty. He kept shouting at the spirit that obviously both of us were seeing before jumping out of the car into oncoming traffic and was hit by a semi-truck. Carl died that day, and I have not seen or heard from my dad since. Story 2. The man outside my window. I am 14 years old now and a freshman at Greenville High School. I have a passion for playing soccer. I've been playing since the age of 4, and I'm trying to get a scholarship soon. The story that I'm about to tell you is simply unexplainable. So my mom and dad divorced when I was 7 years old. My dad and mom are both remarried, but I live with my mom and stepdad. Last Friday, which was Halloween night, the craziest thing happened. I was sitting in my room checking out some cool filters on TikTok. I took a couple photos, just random face filters. But the last filter that I used, I noticed that my phone was recognizing 2 faces that were not there. I thought maybe it was like a glitch in my phone or something until I went into 2 separate rooms, the kitchen and the living room, and the same thing happened. I restarted my phone 3 times, but the face recognition feature continued to pick up faces that simply were not there. I just thought to myself, it's probably a glitch or something with the app itself, and I went to sleep because I had soccer practice in the morning. As I was going to sleep, I heard 2 voices, pretty much having a conversation right outside my window. This went on for about 2 or 3 minutes, and it seemed they were not speaking English or Spanish. It was definitely a language that I never recognized. I checked the security system through my phone to see who was talking outside. When I finally checked out the camera, I was very shocked to see there was no one out there. We had a total of 8 cameras installed right outside my window and the surroundings areas because I was caught 3 times sneaking out in the middle of the night. The voice then began to speak very loudly and angry, it seemed. Without calling my mom into the room first, I called the police. After I dialed 911, it rang a couple times, and I did not hear the 911 operator. Instead, I heard clear the same voices that was arguing outside of my window through my phone. I got up immediately to go tell my mom what was happening, but my door was locked from the outside. I screamed as loud as I possibly could, but nothing happened. My mom usually comes into my room and yell at me because my music is playing too loud or my PlayStation is too loud. There were no music or electronics on in the house, and her room was right next to mine. I went to go look outside, and before I could reach the window, something pushed me down. I fell to the ground, and I could not move or speak. In fact, the only thing I could do was blink my eyes. As I did that, a large man with clown face painting paced around my room. He literally was pacing around my outside window, and he walked right through my window into my room. I could not tell his ethnicity because of the face paint, but sure, he was very creepy. This is the creepiest man I've ever seen. My heart was racing. He was screaming at the top of his lungs and pointing his finger at me. I had no idea what he was saying. This is a language that I've never heard before. I could only move my eyes. He then placed his hands around my neck as if he was going to choke me. As his hands pressed against my neck, I think my body went to hell. It's like I teleported out of my room directly into hell. I saw fire all around me and heard screams coming from all around me. It was extremely hot, and there was a big red door about 20 feet in front of me. There was an unseen force that was forcing me to walk towards the big red door. As I got towards the big red door, there was a big bang, and the red door disappeared. All I saw was darkness. Then I returned to my room somehow, and the man with the face paint walked slowly into my mom's room, going straight through my walls. Once I could not see him anymore, I could hear myself screaming again. I could move my body and everything seemed back to normal. I screamed for my mom to wake up and that there was a man in the house trying to kill us. My door then opened by itself. I ran into my mom's room to tell her what had happened, and she said she didn't hear a thing. She was sitting quietly on her bed, reading a book. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I lived in a small apartment on the south side of Chicago. First, I'll tell you a little details. It was midsummertime. My room is in a P-shaped, with the door at the bottom. The one window I had was completely closed. I had no pajamas on. I only had underwear because of the weather at the time. And my mom was in the living room watching TV, about to go to bed. I was fast asleep when all of a sudden I felt a hand on my back. I was laying on my stomach. I jumped up because I didn't expect to feel a hand on my back. When I looked around my room, I didn't see anything. Mostly because it was so dark and my eyes were trying to adjust to the dark. I got out of the bed and walked into the living room where my mom was. And she asked me, "What the heck are you still doing up?" I don't remember exactly what I responded, since this was such a long time ago. After my mom walked me back into my bed, I fell right back to sleep. A few years after that, my mom told me I had a conversation about that apartment. She said that in that apartment, very weird things were happening. Some examples are when my mom was done showering, she opened the curtain, and when she went back, no more than 5 seconds later, the curtain was closed. Turning on the TV in the middle of the night by itself, and a weird clicking noise, we suspected that our house had some type of poltergeist. And when me and my mom were almost done with our conversation, I thought about that. I thought about that night, and I can vaguely remember a black mass shape standing in the corner of my room. How do you think you're scoring tonight's show? Story number 4. The grocery store. I recently just got my first job at a grocery store. It's kind of awesome because I started this job on my birthday. Anyhow, I'm getting 3 days a week now, which was pretty awesome because I was able to pay for my car insurance myself. I had just turned 16 and me and my family just moved to Wyoming. So this happened exactly 2 months ago. Normally my shift consisted of facing items and cleaning the floors and also the bathrooms. This was clearly the busiest day of the year, but I may be a little bit over-exaggerating. It was definitely the busiest day of the week, which was always Tuesdays for us. In fact, we had lines outside of the door waiting to get in because of social distancing policies. I was working in the back room stocking shelves, and I heard a terrifying scream come from the front of the store. As I went to investigate, all the lights in the store went out completely. And then I heard children laughing and running. I immediately opened the door that led to the front of the store. And that's when I saw it. I saw my first dead body. There was a man laying on the ground right outside the bathroom door with an axe in his head. There was blood all over the floor, and it seriously looked like a horror scene from a movie. There was no one else in the store, which was highly alarming because, as I mentioned earlier, this is our busiest day. There's usually a minimum of 30 people in the store from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. I thought to myself, I should probably check this guy's wallet to see who he is and probably see if he have a cell phone on him that maybe I can contact his wife. Then all of a sudden, I see a woman in a long black dress walk into the cooler area. She seemed to be transparent to a certain degree. I was completely freaked out. She did not say anything. She just looked at me as she slowly walked into the cooler area. I looked back down to check out this guy's wallet, and the body was gone. Completely vanished. There were still mounds of blood all over the floor, but the body was gone. And that's when things took even a stranger turn. As I ran out of the store, I could see my car in the parking lot. I ran out the front door, and when I looked back, I saw the woman in black. And she also had 3 small children, all staring at me. They were all dressed in black clothing, with hoods down by their neck. I ran to my car and started it, and then sped off as fast as I possibly could. I tried calling the police, and I noticed I must have left my cell phone at the store. So I just headed towards the police station, hoping that a police officer would pull me over for speeding. As I was getting off the expressway, I heard the children laughing again. This time, it was a lot more close. I looked back into my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw the lady in black. She had the most sinister looking grin on her face that I've ever seen. And I felt this sense of emptiness and helplessness inside. I asked her, what does she want? And then her mouth opened in an unhuman way. It looked as if her mouth opened so wide, it looked like a snake about to eat its prey. Being distracted, my car sped off the road into a ditch before being consumed in flames. I managed to escape the burning vehicle, but there was no sign of the woman or the children. Police arrived about 3 or 4 minutes later. They must have seen the flames from the highway, is what I thought. But when the police arrived, they told me they received a 911 call 30 minutes ago that a burning car was in a ditch. But what freaked me out even more was that the person that called in the burning vehicle complaint was me. There was a recording that had my voice frantically calling the police a half hour before this incident even happened. It's simply unexplainable and impossible. I told the police that it was not me on the recording, and also told them everything that had happened at the store. The sergeant sent 2 cops over to the store, and there was no dead body. There was no women, no children. All the lights worked. There was no blood. It's like it never happened. The entire store was packed with shoppers, and all the employees said that nothing had happened at all day. And after reviewing the videotapes from the security cameras, it showed me going into the store, but never leaving the back room. Now let's recap today's show, and let's figure out which stories were true and which were false. How do you think you scored today? Before I give you guys the results, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel to keep this awesome content coming. What about the Uber driver? Is it possible that his dad somehow came back to get vengeance from the guy that killed him? Or did I just make this story up? If you answered true, then you're correct. This story actually did take place. What about the man in the window? You know, with the face paint? Is it possible that this young teenage soccer player actually went to hell? If you answered true to the story, I gotcha. This story is completely made up. What about the story of the 7 and 8-year-old who was seeing the poltergeist and feeling all these apparitions? Could this actually have taken place? You bet. This actually happened. And how about the grocery store worker and the woman in black? Is it possible that this could have taken place anywhere? I mean, if this is true, then it has to be some type of logics of teleportation. If you believe that this story was false, then you're wrong. This story is inspired by true events. It actually happened.